are.
Okay, you're on.
All right, so this week we pick up with vaYiqra, which is Leviticus chapter 20, and we're picking up with verse 6. So I'm going to back up to verse, it's very much related to verse 6. What I translated, the way I translated verse 5 was, then I will set my attention against that man and his family and will excommunicate him and all adulterers like him who commit adultery with Moloch from the midst of their people. So we learned last week that when the Bible says, die, he die, it's not talking about the people are supposed to put this person to death. Something, something funky's going on here. Anyway, sorry about that. I saw myself in the monitor and got freaked out. It's not that God's people are supposed to put people to death because they literally killed their own child. Um, God said, if the people don't take care of it, he will. And what's worse is if the people don't take care of it, that person and their whole family are going to be punished. Why? Because God punishes the children of people who commit such a crime? No, because the people pretending like it didn't happen, pretending like they didn't know it didn't happen, the people covering for somebody who just, gave their child to be slaughtered on the altar of Moloch became guilty when they covered for that person. Remember? So it's not that they are being punished for what that person did. They're being punished for what they did. The whole family, if the whole family is involved. But there was also something else that we learned from that. The punishment was not death, it was excommunication, which is biblically what's called death, because you're cut off from your family, you're cut off from your friends, you're cut off from your religion, you're cut off from your people, you're cut off from the land of Israel, from your people's land. That's excommunication. That's as cut off as it gets. And you don't get to come back. So, but it used a couple of idiomatic phrases. It said that he would set or establish his face, which means he'll turn against that person. And then it said that he would cut them off, which, as we learned, was excommunication. And he called people who sacrificed their children to Moloch adulterers, because that's worshiping an idol. Part of what you do to worship an idol is to give your firstborn child to be killed on that idol, right? Because you're practicing you're committing the practices of that religion, right? So here's something much less egregious, but it's still idol worship. Now, it's not the kind where you get excommunicated from, but you are in trouble. You have committed a sin. If you go into a Chinese restaurant where you have to walk past graven images and idols, you've just committed a sin. If you, well, not walking past it, but walking past them to go inside to eat, when you sit down to eat, you have committed a sin. If you walk into a Chinese place that doesn't have stuff like that on the outside, but the first thing you see when you walk in the door is a Buddha, and you go on and eat, you have committed a sin. If you walk up to that Buddha and rub its belly and go in and eat, you've committed an even more egregious sin, because that's part of the idol worship. So if you're going to eat in a Chinese restaurant, the first thing you need to find out is, are there any graven images or idols outside? Okay, we're good with that. We walk inside, we look around and see if there's anything like that on the inside. If there's not, like the place here in Bastrop, they have nothing like that. It's a Christian company. They're all Asian, but they're Jesus followers. So they don't have any of that stuff in their place. You can go and eat Chinese in a place like that. And it's pretty good Chinese too. Uh, but that's idol worship. I've had people get really angry with me over that, but that's idol worship. If you're, doing things that are part of what that practice is. So you got to be careful about things like that. Go into a Mexican restaurant and they have the little Mother Mary thing and stuff like that, or, and the little sun god and stuff like that, and you eat, you've committed a sin. Again, they're not on the level of sacrificing your child to Moloch, but it's still a sin. It still makes you unclean. All right. So let's move on to verse 6. Now, very literally, verse 6 says in English, and the soul that shall turn to the soothsayer and to the sorcerer to adultery after them, and give me faces my, there's your idiom, in soul, and it's the she, so it's these, and cut off with it from midst people, he or it. He and it are the same thing in Hebrew. Um, so it starts off with the word veha nefesh, your root word there being nefesh. So veha and the nefesh, the soul. And they're using that word the way we do in English. There were 120 souls on board the ship, or there were 180 souls on the airplane, or whatever. So it's being used in the same manner. So this isn't something spiritual. Then it says asher tifnei, so that shall turn. So the person, you can say person instead of soul. That would make more sense. The person that turns, to turn oneself, from this way to that way. Is that okay? You're going this way, you're going that way. To turn is to turn the body, to turn towards something. And it says L2, ha'ovot, the person who turns to a soothsayer. Now, what's a soothsayer? We can't be completely sure. We don't really know. The Hebrew words are very rarely used, and what exactly they mean, we can't be positive. But the closest thing that we can come to that is the soothsayer. Is it? The Jusinius said to mumble, i.e., a soothsayer, one who invokes the names of the dead by the power of incantations and magical songs in order to give answers as to future or doubtful things. The reason why they say this is because there's an example of this in the Bible. The king of Israel, Saul, went to somebody that was called by this name, and that's exactly what that person did. So, soothsayers pretty safe for this one. It's the next one that's even harder to explain. But then he goes on, he says, a python or a soothsaying demon. Okay, that comes way later in history. It does not belong in a biblical dictionary or lexicon, but it found its way in there. It's nonsensical. It's from the wrong time period. Then it says, Ve'el ho yid onim. And so uh, we're using the word sorcerer. This one's less clear. Jusinius said a spirit of divination, a spirit of Python, here we go again, with which the soothsayers were believed to be in communication. So the first one is about the person who's trying to communicate. The second one is of the person whom they are trying to communicate, if you will, right? So it's the one doing like the person who Saul went to, and that person was the first word, and then the person that they pulled up. Now this is supposed to be a righteous person who was pulled up. So I find that very iffy because of who was pulled up, and the Bible does not say it wasn't really that person, and that was a righteous person. So it makes it a little iffy for me that that's a correct translation, but it's as good as we can do. Nobody really knows for sure. But it says lizanot, and that's your word for adultery, to commit adultery. It's metaphorically to be given to idols, to idol worship, to worshiping idols. The prophets use this word for those Hebrews who, after entering into the marriage union with God, chose to worship idols, right? And of course, that word is used of husbands and wives who are unfaithful to each other and stuff like that. That's which came first, the worshiping idols or the idols to be worshipped. Who knows? Can't say chicken or the egg here. Then we have who go after the idols. They're the ones that are turning toward idol worship. Then it says ve natati. There's your natan. That's the give, to set, to place, to establish, to place something in someone's hand, that sort of a thing. This is et panai. So here we go. God's going to establish his faces. And remember, it's in plural, not because God's a Trinity, but it's in plural because God is alive. So God will turn his face banafesh against that person. Remember, this is when the bait that's usually in or with becomes against. The right word is against here. He will turn his face against that soul. Then it says hahiv, that's the she, which means these. So these, in other words, those souls, let's say it that way. VaYiqra. So here you have that, and cut off. And it's literally the idea of cutting a garment, to be cut off. Then it says Oto Mikerev, so it's cut off from the midst amo of the people, of his own people, not just some random people. So our translation, and the soul who shall turn to the soothsayer and the sorcerer to commit adultery with them, I will set my attention against my face. I'll set my attention against that soul and excommunicate him. So verse 5 split the phrase and cut off he from midst of people he into two parts. The first part was and cut him off, or cut off he. And then the second part was from the midst of the people he. So it took that one idiom and broke it up into two. This verse doesn't do that. This verse puts that whole thing together as a single idiom. Just thought I'd point that out. But it's how we know what being cut off means, is because we understand the way an idiom is developed in Hebrew. And I'll say it again. I think I said it last week. First, you get the explanation, then you get the idiom, or first you get the idiom, then you get the explanation. So when you see stuff like that, that's how you know it's an idiom. Besides, one part of it generally isn't going to make any sense at all. All right, so then we go to the next verse, which is, and make sanctify you and be you holies, in plural, for I, Yahweh, God's you. So we have this first word is from the root kodesh. You have vehit kadesh tem. So your kadosh is in there, right? It's to make yourself to sanctify yourself, to make it happen. That's the heat being added to the word heat, or at least the sound heat. That's not really so much a word as it's the sound. The heat, kadish tem. So the heat, though it's just a sound, that's make, sanctify you. So make yourself sanctified. You have to do this. God's not going to do that. You are. And it's to be pure, to be clean, to be holy. Uh, and that's of sacredness, right? So it's used of a man who devotes himself to any god, of course, because other religions will call themselves holy if their people are devoting themselves to that particular god. Of course, this is a book written by Jews to Jews concerning Jews, concerning the Jewish religion. So we are talking about Yahweh God here. So we devote ourselves to God, to Yahweh God. And it's to set aside something for a very specific purpose. And it's only for that purpose. So for you to be holy, you have to set yourself apart to be holy before God, which means what sets you apart from everybody else is that you live according to God's law, not your law. You let God make the decisions, not you. And it says, vaYiqra, and you be, oops, mouse got in the wrong spot, Kedoshim, holies. You be pure, you be clean, free from defilement, free from idolatry, free from things that are profane, set apart. And why would it be in plural? Because there's a lot of stuff that we do that keeps us set apart. We follow God's law. We don't steal. We don't kill. We don't covet. And on it goes. So it's plural for that reason, but it's also plural because that makes it future. In other words, it'll always be that you're supposed to be this. You can't be unholy one day of the week or 6 days out of the week and be holy one day of the week. You have to be holy from now on. That's why it's in plural. More that reason than any other. Okay. Then we have Ki ani Yahweh Elohechem, because I am Yahweh. This is God talking, your God. And it's, of course, God's in plural. And just in case I haven't said this in a while, the reason why God is in plural is not because he's Trinity. That's nonsensical, and I've heard that many times over my life. Well, it's in plural. There must be three. No, plural is two or more, not three, and no more, no less. Plural means there's more than one in English. Plurality does not exist in Hebrew the way we think of it. Plurality means it goes on forever, that it's alive. And so when we speak of the real God, we call him God's, Elohim, God in plural, because he's alive. His face is always moving. Even if he were to sleep, which he doesn't, his face would still be moving. Your face moves the whole time you sleep. If it didn't, you wouldn't be breathing, right? So, in the biblical terms, when they spoke of something that was living, that was alive, they spoke of it in plural, which is why the word for idol is used in singular, because it only has one attribute. If you make a happy face out of it and you turn it upside down, it's just an upside down happy face. It's not now a sad one, right? Okay. So let's go to the translation here. Thus, Now, he's already told you about you got to be holy and all that kind of stuff. He's already told you can't give your kids to Moloch. And so he's summing this up at this point. Thus, here's how I'm going to translate sanctify yourself, because it's an idiom. Well, it's not really an idiom, but it's idiomatically used here. And how I know this will be in the next verse. But I'm going to have to get ahead of myself to make this sentence make the proper sense. Thus, obey my laws, ordinances, and instructions. Like I said, we'll get to that in the next verse, how I know this. That's how you sanctify yourself. And be set apart. That's that word kodesh, holy, or holies. That means forever. For I am Yahweh, your God. You do it because if Yahweh is your God, this is what you do. You obey his laws, his ordinances, his instructions. That's how you sanctify yourself. You set yourself apart by doing this. And you do that, it says, because Yahweh is our God. If Yahweh is not our God, I'm pointing at the screen you can't see. Just realized that. No, just look at my screen. Okay. Well, at least I made myself laugh. Okay. There's some verses in a letter written by John. I don't remember which one, but he said the way that we know that we know God is because we obey him. We live according to his commandments. I wonder where he got it, pointing at my screen again. Thus, obey my laws, ordinances, and instructions. John would have known this because he obviously had read all this. Sanctify yourself. That's what this means. And be set apart because God is holy, because he's our God. That's actually going to be in that book. That's from that set of lectures I did. I actually translated all that and put that in there so that we could see this. Okay, so I haven't even been looking. Yeah, I got plenty of time. Okay, verse 8. And guard you ordinances my, and do them, with them I, Yahweh, from holy you. So you understand the other stuff's coming, right? This is how we know. This is how I knew how I should translate the last verse, because it's all in this same chapter. Anyway, so we start off with Shemartem, Shamar, to guard, to keep, to watch, in a narrow sense, as a man tending to his garden. In a wider sense, to keep safe, to preserve, often used of God as guarding men. To observe, attending to anything, like observing God's law. To keep, to observe as a covenant, the commandments of God, to keep and observe the commandments of God. That's right out of the Jacinius. To keep the Sabbath, to honor and worship God. So think about this. It said as a man to his garden. What's a man do? Well, he takes the land and he clears it. He gets all the rocks and the whatever out of the way. Then he tills the ground, and then he puts seeds in there, and then he puts some fertilizer on it, if you will. He's going to put some seeds in there and fertilize it and put some water on it. And as it grows up, he's going to be plucking away the weeds. He's going to take away the bad. Why? So that the good can grow up, so that the good can blossom, so that there's more fruit on whatever it is that he has planted. This is the way we're supposed to think of our Torah observance, because this is exactly what's being spoken of here. So then it goes on, et chukotai. So it's ordinances my ordinances. That which is established or defined. spoken always of a single law or ordinance, which is hysterical because this is in plural. So obviously somebody got something wrong here, Jasinius. It's of a law of heaven. It's of a custom or a practice. Tradition. Tradition. I wonder where they got that idea where tradition was so important. Yeah, you're keeping God's commandments, his ordinances, his laws. Uh, because you think of it, what we call laws these days, that's not even the word for law, it's instructions. And what they call the law are actually the instructions to the law, which are the mitzvotai, his laws. Commandments is sometimes the word that they translate mitzvot uh, into in English. These are the actual laws. You will not kill. Then there's instructions that tell us the difference between manslaughter, first degree murder, second degree murder, what is murder, what is not murder. That's the actual Torah. That's what that means, the instruction to the mitzvot. In the mitzvot, when it talks about the Eseret mitzvot, the Ten Commandments, those are the 10 categories. The word should have been category, not commandments. Yes, literally it's commandments or laws, but in this case, it should have been categories because under those categories, there's what the Jews call 613 laws, which are not laws. Those are instructions on the law. Some of them are law, but that's why we use this word ordinance, because the ordinance, they first you have the 10 categories. And under those categories, you're going to have ordinances and instructions. Ordinances will come with instructions, and then sometimes you get instructions that are directly connected to one of the categories. So that's what confuses people, because your English Bibles translated all of them just as law, as if it said Torah every single time, which it does not. The Bible's real clear. The Hebrew Bible is quite clear on which one is a category, which one is a hukot, an actual law, and which one is a Torah, which is a what I just say, instruction on how to carry that stuff out. You have all of those things to deal with, right? So here we're talking about the actual law itself that falls underneath the categories. Then it says, va'asitem, to do them and do them. It's to do, to work, anything, to make, to produce, to fabricate. It's when our forefathers, those of us who follow Judaism, our forefathers are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moshe, Aharon. Those are the people who followed God's law who went before us. Wait a minute. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they came before the law was given. No, because the Bible tells us in several places that the law was here before we were, before the foundation of the hosts. I know yours says world, but the Hebrew word is Zevaot, the hosts. We are the hosts. Those of us who follow Yahweh God are the hosts of earth. You have the hosts of heaven, that'd be Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are there, so they're the hosts of heaven. And that would, of course, include whatever else is up there. You know, people talk about angels. That's not in the Bible. It's not. It uses the word melachim, which means what's the English word for that? Messenger. Sorry. I know exactly what I meant in Hebrew. Couldn't think of anything in English. So it's messengers. And okay, use angels if you have to. I would, but I'm sure you'll do fine with that. But you get it. When our forefathers were at Sinai, they were speaking for us. And they said, everything that God has said, we will asa and shema. We will do and obey. We will make it happen. That's what's being said here. You got to make it happen. This is Otam ani Yahweh mekadishchem. Do that with them. I am Yahweh from holy you. Mekadishchem, from holy you. What does that mean, Rob? Let me give you the translation. And you will guard my statutes and do them. You will make it happen. You'll find a way to make it happen. Then it goes on, I am Yahweh, from whom your holiness comes. From holy you, from whom your holiness comes. There is nothing that we could have ever done as human beings that would make us holy. So God gave us the Torah, and it has the mitzvot. There's so much there. The mitzvot, the chukot, the Torot. It has the categories, the laws, the instructions. It has the Nevi'im. It has the Ketuvim. There's so much there. But the main ones here, in where we are speaking in terms of being holy, is the Chukot. I should start with mitzvot, Chukot, Toratot. Right? Those are the main things. This is what we're talking about mostly right here. These are the things that are so unbelievably important. And we couldn't accomplish these things if God had not given them to us. Right? So our holiness, our obedience to these things comes from Yahweh. That's no different than God saying, this is my lifestyle. And that same section of New Testament stuff, I mean, there's some good stuff in there. Jews shouldn't be scared of that at all. Because if you're Jew and you're reading it from a Jew's point of view, there's some really good stuff in there. And this guy, Yochanan, by the way, same guy who wrote the Mishnah, in case you didn't know that, was a follower of Yeshua. Yeah, we kind of whitewash over that little fact in Judaism, but that's the same man. It's why I really like his stuff better than any of them. It's such good stuff. But he said, those of you who say that you're the children of Yahweh God ought to live like he lives. It's, I guarantee you, he got that from this verse. I am Yahweh, from whom your holiness comes. And what are we talking about? The Torah. I'm just going to sum it all up in that one word, the Torah. The commandments, the ordinances, the instructions, the Torah. From that, our obedience to that is the place from which our holiness comes. And that was given to us by God. And what he's saying here, from whom your holiness comes, he's saying, this is my lifestyle. That's how Yochanan knew that. I mean, I could take it even further. This is like God saying, I am the Word of God. If it's your lifestyle, it's who you are, right? Just saying, just throwing that out there. Okay. Heard some comedian say, I hate it when people say, I'm just saying. That's my favorite thing to say. Hope he doesn't hate me. Okay. I don't even remember who it was. Just some comedian. So we're on verse 9. Very literal English translation. They never make sense. But very literally it says, for a madman Remember that what that was? For man that he curse, father him, and mother he, dead he dies, or die he dies. Father him and mother he, curse blood his in he. So we start off with ish, ish. Ki, ish, for man. How do you translate that and make that make sense in English? How about anyone? Man, anyone. You could say everyone. Sometimes it's one to another. Asher Yekalel. For anyone or everyone who this is to curse, to be light. It's the opposite of heavy. It's to diminish, to disregard. What are we saying here? What's the word I'm looking for? Marginalize. For anyone who marginalizes. Are you hearing it? To be light, opposite of heavy. To be diminished. You're following what's being said here? Marginalize. And if you marginalize, the Jusinius went on to disgrace parents or teachers. Why? Because your parents taught you how to live. If you're not living the way your parents taught you how to live, you're marginalizing what they taught you. If you're not doing what your teacher taught you, you're marginalizing what that teacher taught you. This is a marginalization. To follow in a different way because you've marginalized. You think that your way is better than what your parents taught you, better than what your teacher taught you. And we live in a really strange time where teachers are teaching our kids that what their parents are teaching them is wrong and they should listen to their teachers. There's a no-win situation if you're trying to follow God's law, if you're trying to be a child of God. Wow, because you're not supposed to marginalize your parents or your teachers. But I'm telling you, if your teachers are teaching you stuff other than what your parents are teaching you, now I'm not saying that all parents teach you right, but as far as you're concerned, being the child, they're right. Not your teachers, your parents. So don't do that. Don't fall into that. Okay. So who exactly? Is it going to be the parents? Is it going to be the teachers? We don't have that as yet. Then it says et aviv, his father. Those who disgrace their father by marginalizing them. That's where we are. Their father, their earthly father. Then it says ve'et, and imo, their mother. Mut yumat, die he die. Then it says aviv, his father. Oh, his father dies? No. Ve'imo, and his mother. Kilel, remember that curse? To diminish, to disregard. It's to just well, it's kind of the same thing as what we've already talked about. There's the idea of marginalization here. Damive, but what are they marginalizing? The blood, his blood, the child's blood. You've got to know that's idiomatic. You can't literally marginalize somebody's blood. For anyone, for anyone who disregards his father and his mother will be excommunicated. Die he die. His father and his mother will disregard his existence. They will curse the blood in him. Literally, that's in Hebrew. What happened to my mouse here? I left out that last thing. So it says, Kilel Damaiv Bo. Remember, that's that sound. It's just a bait followed by a bob, so it's bow. It's not bow as in come here. It's bow as in him. So they will curse the blood in him. That's an idiom. It's to disregard his existence. For those of you who have seen the movie Fiddler on the Roof, my wife knew exactly where I was going with that. Probably all you did too. Remember the scenes where the parents are disregarding their children? I wonder where they got that. vaYiqra, chapter 20, verse 9. Onkelos' vaYiqra by Drauzina Wagner said, and I quote, "Why is the command repeated twice in the passage? Ibn Ezra disagrees and contends that the mode of death cannot be ascertained by the plain meaning of the Hebrew words, but only from oral tradition. Onkelos's Katla Hayab is nothing more than an explanation of the metaphor." Now remember, these guys did not have the advantage of being able to read a book by Casuto. Umberto Moshe David Casuto. He had a big old name. Umberto Casuto is plenty. You can find him. His books are fabulous. He was the world's leading authority on Mesopotamian okay, I'll just say literature. That is literally the word I was trying to find, and all I could think of was liturgy. And it's like, that's not right. He was the world's leading authority. He was a professor at the Hebrew University. He is since passed, but what we have that he left us is absolutely phenomenal. Get everything you can get that he wrote, that it's in your language. Most of it is not, but some of it's been translated into English for you. If you can read Hebrew, he's got a few extras you can read. If you can read German, he's got a bunch of extra you can read, but I can't do German. I don't know about you. So it says, for anyone, for man, ish, who disregards his father, who marginalizes his father and his mother, he will be excommunicated. We've already established that this is not a physical death. This is something that these guys could not possibly have known in their time. And there was a time in the first century when CE, when the Jews began to become very Hellenized. I mean, by the first century CE, they're all but completely Hellenized. And they began to take everything very literal. So you had two groups of people. You had the Hasids, like Yeshua and his followers. It's why your Bible talks about the saints. Hasid is where we get the word saint. They're the holy ones, right? They're the ones who live according to the Torah. Now, the group that Yeshua belonged to, they were the old school. They were the ones that saw everything idiomatically because it was idiomatic. But you had the Perushim group. Well, of course, Yeshua was Perushim, but the group that was literal were the ones that he wound up clashing with because they were taking things literal that were not literal. And this killing people became literal to these Hellenized Jews. And you find this in the Dead Sea Scrolls where they're complaining about the Sanhedrin not killing anyone. Well, the Sanhedrin was old school. They knew good and well they weren't supposed to actually kill somebody just because he didn't do what his parents wanted him to do. God's not like that. And they knew that. But the Hellenized Jews didn't. And so you have Onkelos comes along and the Onkelos. There was a person supposedly named Onkelos, but he died long before the Onkelos book was put out. So the man named Onkelos did not write the Onkelos. And we know this. Drauzine and Wagner point this out in their book series, that we know this because there's too many quotations in the work of Onkelos that were written after the 400 CE, and the Onkelos who supposedly wrote the work called Onkelos died in the first century CE. Not possible for these two to go together, right? That's how we know. So this Onkelos literally took out everything old school. Everything that was of Jewish custom and culture up until the first century was gone with this book, with this very literal, very Hellenized translation. So you get into the 11 and 1200s where you get all of these big sages, Maimonides and Nachmanides, and who else is there? Rashi, even Ezra, all the really big names, they come out of that time period, and all they have is the Onkelos. They've never been to the land of Israel. None of them speak Hebrew at all. I know there are people who will tell you they did, but they did not. Nothing they ever did was written in Hebrew. Well, Rob, I have a copy of it in Hebrew right here in the house. Yeah, look at when that was translated. And it was translated. Notice the word translation in your work. It was translated into Hebrew. It was not written in Hebrew. Anyway, Talmud being just like that. It was translated into Hebrew. It was not written in Hebrew. So Judaism of old got lost, and these men invented a new Judaism. And it's the Judaism we know today, and it has very little connection to the Bible, particularly to the customs and culture that existed before Hellenization. That is so disconnected from modern Judaism. But anyway, I don't know why I got off on that. So these people are not supposed to be killed. They're supposed to be kicked out from their family, their community, their people, their nation. Is this forever? No. How do I know that? Because God does not turn his face against them. The only time it's forever is if God turns his face against them. Right? So because of this, the tradition became, and this is early tradition, I don't know about what Nachman and those guys said about it, but I do know what the earlier tradition was. And the earlier tradition was, and this existed all the way through the first century CE, if somebody was excommunicated, like say there's a place in the New Testament where Shaul tells them to kick this guy out. He's having an affair with his stepmother, which is terrible. Look what he's doing to his own dad. I mean, holy cow. But he says, kick this guy out, excommunicate him. But in their time, excommunication came with a set of time. We're going to give you 30 days. We're going to give you 60, 90, a year, whatever, depending on how bad the crime was, depending on how long the excommunication was. But it came with a return date. If you wanted to get your life right with God, then when you return and you're ready to go, we'll take you back in. And the reason why that came about, I think, is because of verse 9, because God is not making this permanent in that God is not turning his face against this person. That's the difference. Okay, Drauzine and Wagner also said, why is the command repeated twice in the passage? Even Ezra disagrees and contends, did I already read this? That the mode of death cannot be ascertained. Yeah, I did read this, didn't I? Again, they had no idea that these people weren't supposed to be killed. And even Ezra's right, killed in what way? It doesn't even say stone, he stoned them, So we don't even know how they're supposed to be killed. If you don't know how they're supposed to be killed, then you can't kill them. Kind of the same argument of we can't wear the blue in our fringe because we don't know what color blue it is. Well, if God was worried about the color, wouldn't he have told you? By the way, the word for blue is the same word for a certain shell that you get a blue color from. Well, which came first, the chicken or the egg here? The shell or the color? Nobody knows. So to say that, unless you have that, or not a shell, it's a muscle, or is a muscle in a shell? I don't know. Uh, but whatever it is, that by the way, they found them, and you can get that blue color from that. And here's what I can tell you about it. Comes when you get it and you first dye it, it's really, really royal blue. And if you've had it a few months, a few years, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. Okay, well, what shade of that color is proper and when should we pull it out of our fringe? OMG. If God cared, there would have been more than just 2 verses about it. He doesn't care. Wear the blue.
Just do it.
Just do it. It's your phone.
Okay.
I think I can squeeze one more in. So let's go ahead and do verse 10. Very literally in English, and man that he adulterer, wife man that he adulterer. Hopefully you know why I'm doing that. Wife companion he dead, he die or die he die. The adulterer and the adulteress. So Vaish and man asher that ye ne'af. He adulterer. So adulterer. Adulterer. To commit adultery, use both of the male and female, used of the Hebrews, worshiping idols. So it's and a man who is committing adultery eshet with a woman. Of course, this is the word that they use for wife, by the way. Um, so it could be some other man's wife, but it could just be with a woman of marrying age, is generally what was considered a woman in their time. And no, they did not marry when they were 12 back then. They would become betrothed at very early ages. I mean, as early as right after birth, you could be betrothed and you were legally married, if you will. But that did not mean that that baby was sent home with the husband. No, the child stayed with the parent until they were of marrying age, which that was up to the parent. And it probably was more common that they were 18, somewhere between 18 and 20 before the consummation phase of marriage happened. All right. Just want people to know that because, wow, are they ignorant of the facts there? So the man who commits adultery with, okay, so it's saying Eshet Ish, so it's the wife of another man. Sher Yi Ne'af, kind of like saying he's an adulterer. Eshet, saying wife again. Re'ehu, oh my goodness. The wife of your friend. I know a man whose brother came home and found uh, his best friend and his wife doing this very thing. And uh, he killed them both. Just went nuts, picked up his gun, which was laying right there at the bedroom door, just picked it up and killed them both. He went to prison for 5 years, got out, got custody of his kids, and went on with life. Wow. And that same friend that I'm talking about, whose brother did that, he came home one day and found his best friend and his wife doing this thing we're talking about. And he went and bought a 6-pack of beer and woke up 13 years later on Skid Row and didn't even know what had happened to him. He was an alcoholic and didn't know it. But I guess that's better than killing your best friend. There was a movie with Clint Eastwood in it when said that had happened to his best friend and the wife, and the woman says, "Oh, so you killed him?" And he said, "No, just the wife." And she said, "What?" And he said, "Well, he was my best friend." I remember laughing really hard at that. But anyway, this is Re'ehu. This is where we get the word lover. And in Hebrew, that's completely different than the way we use that term now. In Hebrew, you could talk about two men being lovers, and had nothing to do with them being gay or anything. It's that for you to have a lover back in the old days, in the olden times, you had to be married, right? This was part of it. It's not that if you had sex, you were automatically married. It was that you could not have sex until you were married. And so when you became betrothed, engaged, as we say today, the woman would put a veil over her face. And that meant restriction of access to both the person who has just asked a woman to marry. They don't hug, they don't kiss, and all that stuff like you see people do today. They certainly don't live with each other. None of that happens. She pulls the veil down over her face, and that restricts his access as well as everybody else's. And so on the night that they go through the whole wedding ceremony and it's time to go home together, then her veil is removed. That's the idea behind Re'ehu. Because the lovers, there's nothing between them. It's that idea of uh, like my friend Tommy. I'd like to use him for this example because there was a time when Tommy knew me better than I knew myself, and I knew Tommy better than he knew himself. Um, that's Re'ehu. It's why they use that word because there's no veil, there's no secrets between us. I know everything about him. He knows everything about me. That's Re'ehu. And this is the word they're using. Somebody has just committed adultery with that kind of a friend. And so it says, Moot you mot, only for real this time. No, it doesn't say that. It says, Ha no F. So the adulterer, Veha no Afet, that's the feminine, and the adulteress. So die, he die, the adulterer and the adulteress. So here's my translation. And a man who commits adultery with a man's wife, because his adultery was with his neighbor's wife, with his best friend's wife, uh, both will be excommunicated, the adulterer and the adulteress. So now think of that in something you read in the New Testament and something that Christians teach that is oh so very wrong. In the New Testament, there's a story about some, I think, Pharisees who grab this woman and drag her before Yeshua. And they've got the crowd all worked up. The crowd wants to stone this woman to death because she's been, caught in adultery. Which in their time and place, if she was caught in adultery, that means that the two people who drug her in front of Yeshua saw it happen. Well, what were they doing in the room? That'd be my first question. And then so the Christians say, well, see, they were just trying to trip up Jesus because both of them were supposed to die and they only brought the woman. Neither one of them were supposed to die. They were both supposed to be excommunicated. So Christians don't quite have that right. So if this verse was seen as an actual, Yeshua would have been in violation of this command when he sent the accused woman away after the crowd left them. Would Yeshua have ever done that? No. He was a completely Torah observant Jew. Oh my goodness. I ran out of time. I thought I was running out. Oh no, I can't get this. I got it. So let me finish up. vaYiqra by Drauzina Wagner says, with his neighbor's wife. This is a rephrase of the first part of the verse and is only repeated to emphasize the severity of the deed. Of course, that's even Ezra they're quoting. No, that's that's not what was happening. Well, you know what? I take that back. He's right. That really is. I mean, to me, calling it Re'ehu instead of Haver, that kind of does it for me. That's saying, "Wow, look what you did." But yeah, I think I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to take that back and agree with even Ezra. The reason why it basically is, in fact, repeated: the man in his life, the man, the adulterer and the woman, the adulterer and the woman. It does say it twice, and that is the reason why Jews do that. So I am going to agree with him. Although using Re'ehu, to me, that's like making the explanation bold and giant font. I mean, just that word alone would have done it, but they've repeated it and they've used that word. So God is really saying this is messed up. Shalom, shalom, everybody.
The blessing, Be'ivrit. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.